one of the more difficult things to understand, the Electoral College. And we'll try this a little bit different today just to mix it up a little bit. But the Electoral College is a series of questions that we want to answer, and we'll do this throughout your outline there as well. So don't worry about the part of the outline. This will help me go over it a little bit better. But once candidates win their party's nomination and they go through the campaign, the presidential election is a little bit weirder than what people might think. A lot of them want to say they understand it, but I don't know that they do. Okay, so once we have presumably a Democratic and a Republican candidate running for president, and any independents or third parties that want to jump in the race, we have election day, but it's not the voters that actually pick the president. And people have a hard time dealing with that. And we'll talk about why here in a few minutes. So we got a series of questions that we want you to roll with here, and we'll type out a few things to go along with it. So let's start with this. What is the purpose of the Electoral College? The Electoral College, and we'll type it out like this to an extent. It is an institution which has the purpose of selecting the president and the vice president of the United States. Okay? That is the sole purpose of the Electoral College. That's what they're there for. Put it into a bullet point. No, I don't want that to be the bullet point. Let me undo that because that'll make me feel better. All right, now let's try that. And then we'll bullet point it. All right, that didn't work out quite as well as I planned either, so forget that. We tried. All right, so the purpose of the Electoral College is to select the president and the vice president of the United States. And we could refine this a little bit. The EC, the Electoral College, is a group of 538 voters, which has the purpose of selecting the president and the vice president. All right. So you think that it's millions of American voters that select the president and vice president, but actually it's not. There are 538 people. Their votes are what matters. Oh, gosh. Oh. All right. Well, why do we have this weird institution with this particular purpose? Okay. What's the point in the Electoral College? And it is mentioned in the Constitution. So that's the easy answer, is that the Constitution put it in there like that. But why would they do this? Okay. There was a good bit of debate at the Constitutional Convention. All right. And the debate, remember, a lot of the debate centered around the lawmaking body, but they said also, well, we need somebody to carry out the laws who's responsible for making sure the laws get enforced. And to do that, they decided on a president, a single figure, to carry out or enforce the laws. But they said, well, how do we choose this person? Okay, so there are a number of people at the CC, Constitutional Convention. All right, actually, we'll just abbreviate it this way because people will start asking, who wanted a popular election. All right, that's one alternative that people said. But also, not only did they have a number of people who wanted a simple popular vote, but they also had a number of people, another group, wish to have Congress members select the president. Right? And so there's two competing thoughts here in terms of these particular ideas. You had the people who wanted a popular election. They're like, hey, this is the one figure that the entire group of, that represents the entire nation. So we should let the people decide. But people were concerned because they said, yeah, that's all great, but we don't really trust the people. Because remember, mob mentality is a real thing, and people might choose somebody stupid. Plus, they're not always well educated, and they might pick somebody who's a demagogue who just tells them what they want to hear. Right? So the Founding Fathers didn't entirely trust the popular vote. But also, the people who wanted the popular vote criticized having the members of Congress pick a president. And they're like, well, look, that's going to be an issue, because that's what they did in Great Britain. Parliament selected a prime minister. And in this case, they said, well, that's not a good idea because you're just letting all the elite people, the members of Congress, choose who will be the president. And not only is that dangerous, But you'd also have the issue of it messes with the whole concept of separation of powers, right? If Congress gets to choose who carries out the laws, who enforces the laws, then that person would have a hard time standing up to Congress, right? So what they did what they always did. They compromised, okay? Compromise saves the day. That's our phrase, right? The Electoral College and having a group vote for the president was the medium, the happy medium. Now, it's specifically written that the members of the Electoral College cannot be current members of Congress. They didn't want Congress fooling around and having some extraordinary say in this, so they said, look, we're going to have this group of people, all right? And this group of people, the Electoral College, they're going to pick the president and vice president, but they can't be current members of Congress, all right? So, okay, all right, we got a group of people. Their sole job is to pick the president and vice president. We put it into the Constitution because we don't trust the people, and at the same time, we don't want members of Congress doing it either. Now, who are the people in the Electoral College and who are the representatives? Okay? And here's what we got with this. Let's start real simple. Every state is guaranteed members in the EC, the Electoral College. Ooh, that's lovely, right? Fantastic. Let's take a quick look at a map here, okay? This was the 2020 presidential map, and you can see that there are different numbers labeled on each state, okay? And the numbers on each state tell you how many members of the Electoral College come from that particular state, right? And in West Virginia right now, we're at 5. Yay, 5, right? Florida, 29. Texas, 38, right? And so these representatives, 5 people from West Virginia got to cast electoral votes. 3 people from Wyoming, Alaska, big state, only 3 people, right? Every state is guaranteed electoral votes. So let's go back to this. And every state's guaranteed members along with Washington, D.C. It took the 23rd Amendment to do that, okay? Because up until then, Washington, D.C., because they're not a state, they couldn't vote in presidential elections. Right? Every state is guaranteed representatives. To figure out the number your state receives is your number of senators plus your number of House reps. So it's based largely on population. West Virginia has 2 senators and 3 House reps equals 5 Electoral College members. Yay! All right, and you've got other states, though, like, for example, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up right now. You got other states like California. They have 2 senators and 53 representatives in the House. So that's 55 total, okay? That's how we determine membership in the Electoral College. And every state gets electoral votes, right? So it's largely based on population, plus you get 2 for the Senate seats. All right, so every state has these representatives. Now, the people who make them up, and what we're going to add on here too, the people who serve as members of the Electoral College are largely people you've never heard of. Okay? If you saw, and you can look these up, you can look up the names of the people who are Electoral College members for every single state. And these are people that you've never heard of, because remember, they can't be current members of Congress, right? Well, you know, how do you get to become one of these members of the Electoral College? And the answer is this. Every state has its own criteria for who becomes, probably helps if I type that right. And they change it. Every 4 years, it's going to be different people. Every presidential election, it's always going to be different people, but every state has their own criteria. Some states, like, you literally have to run for the position. Like they'll say, hey, it's Don Scalise versus Adam Riazzi to become a member of the Electoral College. Which one are you choosing? Right? And ultimately, that's how it goes. And West Virginia, what we do, uh, West Virginia has a system where Democrats pick 5 people, Republicans pick 5 people, and whichever candidate wins the popular vote in West Virginia, right, those 5 people get to be the 5 from West Virginia. And so Democrats will pick really loyal party members to be their 5, and then Republicans will pick their 5 people, and whichever candidate wins, that group of 5 people cast their electoral votes. All right. Now, how do these members of the Electoral College know who to vote for? Right? Members of the Electoral College look at the results of the popular vote from their state. Okay? And so what they do is they see, well, who won the popular vote in my home state? All right? And almost all states work on a winner-take-all principle, meaning whoever wins the popular vote gets all the Electoral College votes. So for example, and we'll just go ahead and take this down to the next page. Here in Texas, there are 38 Electoral College members. Usually that's a pretty strong Republican state, and Trump wins it by 5 or 6%. All right, so he wins it's something like 53 to 47, something in that neighborhood. All right, and even though it's 53% to 47%, all these Electoral College members are supposed to vote for whoever their state tells them to. They cast all 38 electoral votes for Donald Trump. All right, that's what they do. Almost all these states work on a winner-take-all system. Okay. And we'll get to the 2 states who didn't here in a second. So West Virginia, all 5 members of the Electoral College, when it comes time to cast their vote, they cast their vote for Donald Trump. Arizona, all 11 members cast their vote for Joe Biden. That's how the Electoral College works. Now, here's the weird thing about this. That's what they're supposed to do, okay? Supposed to do, so keep that in mind, right? Now, because I know people are going to ask, the 2 states do not use the winner-take-all principle. Maine and Nebraska use what's called the +2 system. And here's how it works, okay? And I'll show you some Maine and Nebraska. Now you can see that Maine and Nebraska are both, they got stripes. Ooh, stripes are exciting, okay? And we're going to use Maine here as an example. Maine has, you'll see they have 4 electoral votes, which means they have 2 senators and 2 House of Representatives people. All right. So in the House of Representatives, here are Maine's 2 congressional districts. That's District 1, and the rest of the state is District 2. They have relatively the same population, and so there's a House of Representatives, district here, and there's a House district here. So what they do in the Maine-Nebraska system, or the +2 system, they look at who won District 1. Okay. They look just at this green section in District 1. And whichever candidate won the popular vote just in this district, they get 1 electoral vote. And whoever won just here in the 2nd district, they get 1 electoral vote. And then, for their other 2 electoral votes, they look at who won the whole state. Right? That way, you can still, like if you lose the popular vote in the state, if you were super popular in this district, you could still get 1 electoral vote. And that's what happened here in Maine and Nebraska. You can see that Maine, even though there are 4 electoral votes and Joe Biden gets 2 of them because he won the whole state and he won District 1, District 2 went to Donald Trump, okay? And if you look at the map, right here, District 1 is the more urban area of Maine and District 2 is the more rural area. All right? So Donald Trump gets something even though he didn't win the state. Same thing happened in Nebraska. In Nebraska, Trump wins the whole state. He wins District 1 and District 3, but Joe Biden wins District 2. All right? Now, a lot of people might be like, hey, I kind of like that system. Why don't we use that in the rest of the country? And I'll tell you why in just a minute. All right? So these electoral college members are supposed to vote the way their state tells them to. All right? But they don't have to. No legal obligation to vote for the candidate their state tells them to. Right? Sometimes they defy the voters and become faithless electors. Right? Faithless electors are the ones who refuse to do what their state tells them to do. Faithless electors say, screw the voters, I'm going to do what I want. Wow. Now, have there been faithless electors before? Absolutely. In the history of the country, in all our presidential elections, you've had about 200 faithless electors. No one of them has ever decided a presidential election. Like, it's never tipped the balance one way or the other. Okay? So these faithless electors, though, they have the ability, if they wanted to, they could say, like, there could be, if all 38 people from Texas who were electoral college members said, yeah, I'm voting for Biden, there's nothing they could do about it. Now, states have tried to come up with state laws that penalize them for that, like by fining them, but people basically, you couldn't fine them until after they do it. And it's up to them, members of the Electoral College. And why is it that way? Now, here's what you have to remember. The Electoral College originally, when they came up with this institution, a lot of states early on didn't even bother doing a popular vote. In the first few elections, when George Washington and John Adams and Jefferson were around, some states didn't even have popular votes. The idea behind it was, we just trust, like, there's 5 people from our state, we're going to choose really good people, 5 really good people, wise men and women, who will make a good decision about who the president and vice president should be. All right? Remember, this is a republic where we elect people to make decisions for us. And so the Electoral College was meant to do that. Right? But because it was such a contentious issue, they said, you know what, we should probably let the people have some input here. Okay? So when you go to vote for president, you're telling your members of the Electoral College which way that you think they should vote. Right? But the reality is, those members of the Electoral College, they control who becomes the president and vice president, and they still have the ability to vote however they want. All right? If they had voted, if they had certified all the votes the other day at the Capitol building, like if Texas had thrown their electoral votes to, the candidate of their choice, or if somebody else had flipped, if they chose to do that, that person, they voted for would get those votes. Right? You can defy what the voters in your state want. Excuse me, I didn't mean to bring that up again. All right? So, you don't have to if you're a member of the Electoral College. Now, if you are a faithless elector, you could probably kiss your political career goodbye after that, because people are like, hey, we trusted you to vote the way we told you to. Right? So faithless electors are a real thing. Right? Now, to win the presidency, a candidate must have a majority of electoral votes. Not just more than, you need a majority. And in this case, a majority is 270 out of 538. That's where we're at. You need a majority. Okay? And you can see that in this election, Joe Biden came up with 306. Trump had 232. He's got the majority. He wins the presidency. Right? And that's where we're at the moment. And of course, last week was where they were certifying the Electoral College members' votes. Okay, the Electoral College never actually meets together. They just mail in their ballots. All right? Now, some other issues. Okay? You have to have a majority. However, what if a candidate, what if there were 3 or 4 candidates and no one received a majority? Yikes! Right? Believe it or not, that's happened, and they planned for this as well. In fact, they thought that would be the norm. if no candidate receives a majority, the House of Representatives chooses the president. Holy smokes. And look, this is even great too. The House, and by the way, why would it be the House and not the Senate that gets to choose the president? Right? Because the House represents the will of the people. They're like, hey, deep down, if nobody can get a majority of the electoral votes, it should be the House of Representatives that chooses because they have the people interest at heart. Now, here's the way it works, though, in the House of Representatives. All the House members don't get to vote. Every state's delegation of representatives would cast a single vote for their state. So what that would mean would be, for example, in West Virginia, our 3 House representatives would have to decide how to cast our single vote. Okay? So the 3 representatives, which happen to all be Republicans, would have to say, which candidate are we voting for? All right? Then that kind of, you got 3 people that have to agree. And then out in California, their 53 representatives would have to decide how to cast a single vote. Oh my gosh. Now that's going to be absolutely bananas. They have more Democrats than Republicans out there serving in the House, so the Democratic candidate would do that. Or how about this though? In Wyoming, their 1 representative in the House gets to decide, cast their single vote. And that makes small states super powerful, okay? Well, if the House is deciding, then, small states, they get an interesting role to play in all this, and here's why, all right? Look at Wyoming, the 3 electoral votes, remember 2 of them because of the 2 senators, so they got 1 person. That person becomes immensely powerful because they are now deciding for their entire state how their state's single vote's going to be cast. Where here in California, their 53 people have to decide. Right, guys, that'll get messy. Okay? Now, even then, it's still kind of complex. All right, you go back to this, and a candidate must have a majority of states, meaning 26 out of 50. All right? And you might be asking yourself this too. What if, say, like Iowa here, they have 4 representatives in the House? What if it's 2 against 2 and they're deadlocked? That means that you just throw their 1 vote out because they can't decide. All right? Ooh, gosh, that'd be contentious. All right? Has this ever happened before? The answer is yes. Twice. 1800, Thomas Jefferson, and in 1824, John Quincy Adams. Yeah, woo! All right, trust me, people would go nuts if that happened now. You think it's like there's talk of rigged elections now? Oof, it'd be absolutely insane. All right, so you had this happen twice in American history. The House has had to choose, and oh my goodness, it gets pretty contentious. Okay. Now, one other thing, I forgot to add this question here. What are the campaign strategies that candidates use for the Electoral College? Okay? All right, let's start with this here. All right? Here's something that's really, really important when you're campaigning. Okay? If you go back and you look at these right here, what states do you have to win? Right? And naturally, people want to gravitate towards Texas or California or New York or Pennsylvania or Florida because they're like, oh, they have the most Electoral College votes. And that's only partially true. All right? Why would both major candidates ignore, say, California and Texas? Like they don't do much campaigning there. California, who do we know is going to win? Unless it's something bizarre, you know that the Democratic candidate's going to win California and they're probably going to win New York. So if you're a Democrat, you know you don't need to campaign in these states, okay? Because they're pretty much in the bag. And if you're a Republican who's worth anything, then Texas is going to be for you. You can count on Texas. That state is solid red. West Virginia, they're pretty solid red. All right? You don't worry about those states, the ones you know you got in the bag. And also the same thing here is like if you're Donald Trump, do you think he went to California to campaign? No, he knew he was going to lose there. There's no point, right? You don't focus on the states you know you're going to win, right? Campaign strategy, the focus is on what we call battleground states. The states that could swing in either direction. All right? Sometimes they'll call them swing states too. Battleground states, swing states, whatever you prefer. But the ones that you're like, these could tip either way. And that changes sometimes from one election to the next. But traditionally, like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, those are key battleground states. And this time around, because Arizona was such a toss-up, it was considered a battleground state as well. Arizona, Nevada, you also saw Wisconsin and Michigan. Those were the ones that candidates really had to home in on and make sure that they win. Right? Georgia was a big one as well, and so was North Carolina. But those are the ones that you focus your campaigns there because you don't spend money on advertisements in Texas you know you're going to win. Right? You focus on the ones that are ones you can actually win, the ones that could swing in either direction. All right? Now, a lot of people don't necessarily like that because they feel that, for example, they hate the system, so to speak, because they look at other states, like if you're Wyoming, nobody's going to Wyoming to campaign for president, and you want some of that attention. States like Wyoming and Iowa and West Virginia, they often refer to as flyover states. Right? And flyover states because literally you just fly over them on your way out to somewhere else. Okay? So that's your campaign strategy. You got to focus on those battleground states. Now, we'll focus on the rest of these tomorrow and finish out this chapter, and then we should be able to have a test available for you that you can complete sometime this week. So that's all we got for today.